Hey guys, welcome to FK Talks, the podcast where we discuss sports and business. We have a great podcast today with Richard Bucciarelli on, where we'll discuss soccer in Canada. Here we go. Okay, guys, welcome back to FK Talks. Today we have my former coach, Coach Richard Bucciarelli, on today, an experienced coach. So, Coach, go ahead, introduce yourself, tell us what you do and who you are.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Eliel. It's amazing to see, a former player so young as well that's already got his own podcast going, and it's awesome. I'm happy to be here. So, I just make a long story short. I was a player a long time ago, and I transitioned from there into coaching, and from there into kind of specializing in sports science and fitness and all that. And it's kind of a long way to get from that to where I am now. So I'll just mention what I'm doing now, maybe, and then maybe the other stuff we can talk about it on the way there. But
Yeah.
I have a business and a facility where we do testing and training and also other types of clinical and recovery services like physio, massage, all of that. And that's in Woodbridge and Vaughan, and we do work with lots of soccer players, but we work with lots of other athletes. Also, the company is called Speed Training, and didn't want anyone to be confused about what we do. We try to focus on building speed and power and acceleration and some of those other physical abilities. I'm a professor at the University of Guelph Humber and also at Seneca College and Humber College. So I work, I teach different courses in kinesiology, fitness and health promotion, and also some science courses, chemistry, biology, physiology, that kind of thing. And I completed a PhD. My research was actually done using some of the equipment and the technology that I also use in my business, including some very fast treadmills and some other equipment that's sort of designed to, either to train athletes and make them run faster, and also things like heart rate and GPS that are used to monitor and track performance. So I have a background in that. And in addition to all that, I've also spent a lot of my career working at the higher levels in soccer. So I worked with the women's national teams in Canada for a while, worked with several different college and university programs, men's and women's. Um, I did work with the Toronto FC Academy. I worked with two different clubs in the Canadian Premier League, including most recently with York United in this past season in 2025. And I also spent some time in South America, in Uruguay, working in professional soccer with a second division club there. So I've kind of combined, those three things, running the business and training athletes, teaching and working as a professor and doing research, and also trying to continue to work and stay involved in the higher levels of the game. And so it keeps me very busy. I'm also married. I got three kids, and so I'm I'm
Yeah,
up to
you
my neck
seem
right now, but I'm
busy.
doing
You
okay.
seem busy.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so usually you've gone pretty viral recently on social medias. Everyone kind of knows who you are. And it's very prominent. People have been questioning me. They see you calling the OPDL a scam. So why do you say it is a scam? And what is the evidence that you've seen to back yourself up?
Well, okay, I did work with Ontario Soccer for many, many years, both as a fitness coach, as a sports scientist, and as a coach educator. So, in that role, I learned a lot and I saw a lot. So I'm speaking from my own personal experience and the things that I've seen. And so, why do I call OPDL a scam? Because if you're going to have you can take Canada, Ontario out of it, anywhere in the world, if you're going to have a league or a pathway or whatever you want to call it that is designed to identify talented players and then have those players progress through the pathway, eventually with that pathway leading to, in our case, it's provincial and national teams. In many other countries, excuse me, in many other countries, you would simply have a pathway kind of identifying players into professional clubs or directly to the national team or to the youth national teams. So if you're going to have a pathway like that, then the one thing that you really need to do is you need to make sure that there is no corruption and no bias, and bias meaning that the identification of players is done only by choosing who the best players are. There's no other factors, there's no other variables other than choosing who the best players are. And so that would be the ideal way to have a talented player pathway. But unfortunately, that's not the pathway that we have here in Ontario or in the other provinces in Canada. What we have is we have a league called Player Development League, and I'll tell you later why I put my air quotes up there. Okay. But the way that it works in that league is that that league is very expensive. Basically, the registration fees cost five to $10,000 per player per year. And Ontario Soccer, which is the provincial governing body, gets about 10% of that fee for each player. So if the players pay $5,000 per year, Ontario Soccer gets $500 per player. Now, I mean, that's whatever you could say, well, the federations are taking a cut of the revenue, they need to pay expenses. I could maybe accept that argument. I don't like it, but I could maybe accept that, except for the fact that Ontario Soccer, and they actually go out of their way to do this. They tell players and parents that if those players are not in that expensive league,
Yeah.
then they're not going to be able to play for the provincial teams, and they're not going to be able to go to enter into the pathway to
Mhm.
eventually play for Canada.
Yeah.
So what they're doing is they're coercing players and their parents into registering for a league which is very expensive. And of course, that league is a league which they also receive a cut of the revenue for.
Hmm.
Okay. And so they're coercing players into a league that they get money from.
Hmm.
And that, I don't know what else to say other than
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
literally the definition of corruption.
Hmm.
That's what corruption is. It means that you are taking money after you force someone to do something because you're, dangling this carrot in front of them and making them feel like, well, if the only way that I can possibly play for Canada, if that's my objective, or the only way I can get into that pathway is to be in this league, I better go into it.
Hmm.
And the people who are telling the players to do that, which is the provincial associations, are receiving money from the players' registrations. It's corrupt, it's gatekeeping, it should be, at best, it's unethical and it should be stopped. At worst, and I've made this point before, I'll make it again now. I believe it should be illegal. It should not be legal for a provincial or national sport governing body to coerce players into a league that they take revenue from.
Hmm.
I don't know why it's not illegal. To me, that creates a huge conflict of interest. And of
Yeah.
course, because of how expensive it is, we have no way of knowing whether or not the players that are in that league are really the most talented players. And that should be the objective of provincial programs and national teams. They should be looking to identify who the best players are wherever they are. With this system the way it is now, I would argue that's actually impossible to do.
Hmm. And you've also touched upon that you've been in multiple other countries. Now, what do you see that is so different and that sets them apart from Canada that makes them better than us?
All right. Well, it depends how much time you have. So I know we don't have a lot of time. So I think
Yeah.
what I'll do is I'll just be brief and I'll kind of list three things,
Okay.
which are the kind of the key differences between countries that are successful in soccer and a country like ours that just isn't. And people can look at our men's national team now has done well, and we've had some success here or there, but by
Hmm.
and large, we are not a successful soccer country. And I can identify three reasons why.
Yeah.
The first is that our youth clubs and youth academies in general, all of the programs, teams, clubs, whatever that we have that are supposed to be developing players, well, they don't have a direct incentive to develop players.
Hmm.
Okay. Um, I've made this point before, but we have only three professional academies in Canada, and each of those is tied to a club in Major League Soccer, which is an American league.
Hmm.
That's also a problem because technically speaking, we want Canadian players that are playing in Canadian clubs to be treated as Canadians, as domestic players, and they're not when they're in Major League Soccer academies. But in any
Yeah.
case, those three academies exist in very large cities, and each club is the only professional club in the city. And so what that means is that the academies have no competition. They don't have to compete with any other professional clubs to identify players. And because of that lack of competition, they just don't have any direct incentive to develop. They don't have to. The clubs have very wealthy owners, and the owners can just, spend money on whatever players they want. They don't actually have to develop the players that come through their academy. And what ends up happening, we can see this with Toronto FC, is that in fact, if you look at players who were in the academy or got cut,
Hmm.
sorry, let me say that again. If you
Yeah.
look at players who were in the academy and got cut, or you look at players that are from Toronto that just never even got identified by the academy in the first place. There
Hmm.
are many more of those playing professional soccer right now than there are players who progress through the Toronto FC Academy.
Hmm.
And that includes even players in Major League Soccer. There are so many of them that are playing professionally in that league that had been in the Toronto FC Academy and, got cut, didn't make it, didn't get all the way through. And now they've got successful professional careers in other clubs, either in MLS or beyond. So that is the first problem. The youth clubs are not incentivized to develop because they have no competition. Okay. Second problem, professional clubs here, and that includes Major League Soccer. That includes the USL. I mean, at the moment, we don't have USL clubs, but we did. And that also includes even the Canadian Premier League. Okay. None of those professional clubs have the direct incentive to win that any other professional club in successful soccer countries have. And that's because the professional leagues are set up without promotion and relegation.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? That means that technically speaking, clubs can finish in last place, in second last, they can lose. They can have very
Hmm.
unsuccessful seasons and, it may hurt them. They may lose some fans, whatever, but they stay in the league. And in fact, a lot of times they can't come last and make the playoffs, but look at the Canadian Premier League. You can finish fifth out of 8 teams and still get into the playoffs.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just there isn't that direct incentive to win. There's no promotion. There's nothing to get promoted into, and there's no punishment for losing. There's no relegation. So you combine those two, that the youth clubs are not incentivized to win. I'm sorry, let me say that again. You
Yeah.
combine those two. First, that the youth clubs are not incentivized to develop. And second, that the senior clubs are not incentivized to win. And what you end up with is a system that just is not efficient at developing players and getting the best out of players. So, yes, players will improve, but they won't optimize their potential. It's impossible for them to optimize their potential because they're missing those incentives. So,
Hmm.
now that we've addressed those two,
Yeah.
the third, and you could argue maybe this is even the biggest challenge that we have is that we don't do anywhere near good enough of a job educating and developing coaches.
Hmm. Yeah.
Everywhere else in the world, and I've made this point before, but I'll say it again. Everywhere else in the world, coaches are trained and taught by experts. So you can look at any country in Europe, you can look at countries in South America, you can go anywhere else in the world where the country is successful, and you look at their coach licensing programs. The people who are instructors in those programs are expert coaches. They're people that are coaching in professional and national level teams. They're people that typically have a few decades worth of experience and a track record of success, having developed players and having had success with their teams. And they're also usually very well educated. They tend to have, master's degrees or PhDs in coaching and sports science and all of it. A lot of them are people who even had like professional playing backgrounds, and they're just experts. Usually, the people who coach and teach coaches are the best coaches in the country.
Hmm.
And so you have experts that are leading and developing the next generation of coaches. In Canada, we have the exact opposite. Some of the people, not only the coach educators, but the people who have the jobs called manager of coach education, or even better, director of development.
Yeah.
If you look at the background and the resume of these people, again, these are the people in charge of coach education in the country. Many of them have almost no coaching experience at all. And even the ones that do have some experience, they've coached in, Canadian amateur clubs, maybe in a college or university. They're not
Mhm.
experts. They have nowhere near the level of expertise, which makes the entire coach licensing system, honestly, also a scam.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it's also a scam because coaches are forced to take those licenses if they want to get all of the jobs that pay, all of the jobs in the OPDL, all of the jobs in the, the higher level teams and programs and all of it. The standard is that you need to have a Canadian license. And of course, the Canadian license is taught by unqualified and incompetent instructors. So there's multiple levels of corruption. And since youth academies have no incentive to develop, senior teams and professional clubs have no incentive to win, and we have very poor coach education. These are the main reasons why we struggle compared to other countries that are much more successful than us.
Mhm. And I kind of had like my own little idea of something that we
Yeah.
should start doing in Canada. Do you think, let's say we had competent people teaching the coaches?
Yeah.
I think it should be not mandatory, but recommended for every player to kind of take their coaching licenses and kind of understand what it takes to be a coach. What do you think on this?
I think that's a fantastic idea. And I think, I mean, it depends how young. I mean, I might say, perhaps by the time they're in maybe the 10th grade or something like that. I don't know, maybe earlier than that. But it's a very interesting idea, and I think again, yeah, as you said, if we have experts leading the coach education courses, then having some rule, maybe for certain levels of players too, for the higher
Yeah.
levels or whatever,
Hmm.
making them take coaching education, I think would be a fantastic idea. That's great.
Yeah.
You should approach the people in the provincial and national associations about that. I think it's a fantastic idea. I also think that it would be worthwhile for players in those higher levels to take the basic level of referee training and instruction,
Yeah.
not just the laws of the game. I think it's good to know. I mean, definitely for,
Mhm.
players need to know the laws of the game because a lot of them don't, and a lot of them get, they get confused and they get things wrong. But I actually think it would be really worthwhile for players, especially if they're aspiring to become professional or play at
Mhm.
the higher levels, to get trained as referees and even to have some experience working as a referee, maybe in youth and even in house league, whatever it is. But to do that because yeah, I think it'd be great. So I'm all for it for both. Yeah.
And I saw you on one of the podcasts. You were talking about like Ontario soccer stealing your intellectual property. So what did you exactly mean by this? Like, can you explain exactly
Sure,
what happened?
sure. I created a course called the Soccer Fitness Trainers course. I created that course because I saw after having taken all of my coach education in Canada, I saw that basically in Canada we were not teaching coaches anything about fitness or sports science. And I saw that as a big problem because, as you know, you're a player that's grown up and played in the club system. Did you have
Mhm.
a fitness coach with you every day?
No.
No, nobody does. You don't get a fitness coach with you every day unless you get into a professional club or a
Mhm.
college or university team. It doesn't exist. Even in the TFC academy, there's only one fitness coach for the whole academy. So
Wow.
they also have lots of training sessions where the fitness coach can't be there. I know because I work there and I live
Mhm.
that. So I said, well, fitness and sports science are critical components to coaching education, and in Canada we don't teach anybody about it. So I made my own course.
Mhm.
This was back in 2016. And for 3 years, I taught the course on my own to different clubs and I made it open to other coaches and anyone who wanted to attend. And, it was popular and it got some good responses. And eventually, through some of the contacts that I had at Ontario Soccer, basically myself and the people at Ontario Soccer, we reached an agreement where I would teach my course and my content through Ontario Soccer. Now, there was never any agreement where they paid me for my work. That's my intellectual property, right? It's my course, right? They never agreed to pay me for it. And of course, there was never any agreement or anything put in place that said that I was not allowed to teach this stuff also on my own because that was part of my business. And it's not like Ontario Soccer hired me and gave me a full-time contract as a coach
Mhm.
educator. No, they
Yeah.
just said, "Well, we'll try to sell it. If we sell one, you can run it and that's all." So, in any case, I owned the material, they didn't. And, for about 5 years, everything was fine. I taught my course through them. Sometimes I taught it on my own. Sometimes I
Mhm.
went to go give random coach education clinics to clubs or academies or people that wanted me to do it. I even traveled to different countries to teach. I taught
Mhm.
in the United States a few times, and so everything was fine until one day, Ontario Soccer hired a new person in the role of manager of coach education. And again, like I said, this was another one of those examples of a person who had almost no coaching experience at all. And
Yeah.
of course, no managerial experience. I mean,
Mhm.
they just make this habit of taking people who are not competent, undeserving, and putting them in positions of leadership. So that's what they did. And for some reason, this guy saw that I was teaching a coach education course outside of Ontario Soccer. And for some reason, after he saw it, I guess he didn't like that I was doing that. So he sent me an email telling me that, you know, you can't do this anymore. You can't teach this content.
Mhm.
And I saw the email and I thought, well, that's kind of strange that he's telling me that because, I have no contract. I have nothing in my agreement that says I'm not allowed to do it. And in fact, if there had been something like that proposed to me, I never would have accepted it. But in any case, so I responded politely, but I said, look, there's nothing to talk about here. I own the material. I can teach it if I want to, and there's no reason for us to meet about it. So thank you, but
Mhm.
there's no reason for us to talk. Anyway, I guess he didn't like that email because he replied back to me and he told me that, well, no, actually, the content from your course doesn't belong to you. It belongs to Ontario Soccer. And
Mhm.
if you decide to continue to teach courses with that material outside of Ontario Soccer, then you're not going to be allowed to work with Ontario Soccer anymore. So basically, he threatened to steal my intellectual property, to steal my
Yeah.
work, because he told me that the content doesn't belong to me, it belongs to him or to them, to Ontario Soccer. And he also, threatened to terminate my employment if I continued to do that, to coach and teach coaching courses on my own.
Mhm.
So, I really didn't like that when he did that.
Yeah.
So I decided, and this is one of those things that happens as a coach, and is when you start to work at these higher levels and you start to deal with these incompetent people,
Mhm.
most of the time what ends up happening is you come to a point where you either accept the way that they try to treat you, accept they try to threaten you, they try to bully you. That's what incompetent leaders do. They don't treat you well, they don't respect you, and essentially you're put in a position where you either accept the disrespect or you don't. And the truth is 10, 15, 20 years ago when I first started working, especially at the higher levels, and I can tell you other stories, but maybe we don't have time. But the truth is this happened a lot in different ways where I was not treated with respect. I was threatened and things like that and talked down to. And you when I was younger, I accepted it because I always thought, well, I'll keep going. This is a foot in the door. Maybe, it'll lead to more opportunities and all of that. And the truth is that at this point, this was only 2 or 3 years ago, right, when this
Yeah.
happened. And I just wasn't willing to accept, that level of disrespect and unprofessionalism. It just wasn't acceptable to me.
Mhm.
So when I'm faced with the choice of, well, okay, he's threatening me, I either back down and I say, okay, okay, guys, no, you're right, I won't teach anything on my own anymore. And, yeah, you're free to use my material, whatever you want. I either accept the threat or, I fight back. And basically, as I said, I just couldn't accept it. So I decided to fight back. I hired a very good intellectual property lawyer. We sent them a letter threatening to sue them for copyright infringement if
Mhm.
they ever
Yeah.
did anything with my intellectual property,
Yeah.
and also to sue them for wrongful dismissal
Mhm.
if they decided to terminate my employment over this. And in any case, that led to some meetings with some of the people that are higher up in Ontario Soccer. And, by the time we got to those meetings, the truth is that I said some things that they probably didn't like very much. And, they also said some things that I didn't like very much. And we mutually agreed that we would part ways. So I just didn't want to work with people like that anymore, to be honest. And as I said, I know that a lot of other coach educators here in Ontario and Canada, a lot of other coaches go through the same thing. My experience is not unique. I have another career, as I said, as a professor and running my business. I have lots of other things that I do in my career that have nothing to do with Ontario soccer and Canada soccer. So
Mhm.
as much as it bothered me that I knew that I would never teach courses with, Ontario soccer and Canada soccer anymore, and probably also that I'll never get any more opportunities to work in the national teams and all that, I was willing to sacrifice that because I just did not want to work with those types of people anymore, with people that actually thought that it was okay to threaten to steal my work, and try to kind of, bully me and push me around. I don't
Mhm.
accept it. I don't think other coaches or other people that work in the system should accept it either. And I think, in fact, if a lot of other people, or at least if more people would fight back and push back against it, then maybe things would change. But the problem and the reason why it doesn't change is that everybody at the top level is incompetent.
Mhm.
And so when you have incompetent leaders, incompetent leaders don't want competent people working underneath them. Because
Exactly.
if you're incompetent and you have somebody smarter than you that's working underneath you, you get exposed.
Mhm. Yeah.
And the truth is that even before all of this stuff happened, there were lots of other times when I had conversations with this person in question, as well as with many other people in Ontario soccer and Canada soccer. And the conversations were always me suggesting things to them, me saying, hey, we're not doing fitness testing right. Your OPDL, you're talking about physical standards and development. You're not measuring development. You're not teaching coaches about, proper warm-ups and injury prevention, and everybody's getting hurt. You're
Mhm.
talking about physical literacy, but you're not teaching it properly. Like every single time that I had these conversations with these people in leadership positions, basically the response was always the same. They didn't have any time for it. They didn't understand it. They didn't think it was important. It was always, just the same old thing where I got to the point where I really realized that, as I said, they're incompetent. They don't want competent people. They don't want good ideas. They'll try to steal other people's work if you let them,
Mhm.
but that's it.
Yeah.
So it's just better. You have to stand up for yourself and you have to push back against it. So that's what I did.
So for you standing up for yourself now, are you completely like disassociated from them? Like from Canada
100%.
soccer and Ontario
One
soccer?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So what's like one thing you've seen other than that? Because you said you have a few stories. I have time.
Okay.
What are a few stories that you have seen? Give me good stuff that you've seen in the background at Ontario soccer and Canada soccer.
Wow. Okay. Well, let me think about that one for a minute. Okay. Yeah. Well, okay. I'll go with a simple one first. Okay. In the Player Development League, one of the supposed standards that has been promised to all the players and all the parents who pay all that money is that there's supposed to be mandatory fitness testing.
Hmm.
Okay, now I think because I came and I tested you guys, and you
Yeah.
know how I did it, right? I did it with
Yeah.
electronic equipment,
Hmm.
standardized, and scoring was all done reliably
Yeah.
and using reliable and valid and accurate technology.
Hmm.
Okay, that's the way fitness testing is supposed to be done.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, nobody at Ontario Soccer ever decided to standardize the collection of the fitness testing data that they forced clubs to do. And so I've seen this personally happen where clubs had fitness tests scheduled on a particular day. And that fitness test on that particular day, was outside, which already you really shouldn't do. I know we do it sometimes because
Yeah.
the fields are cheaper or whatever, but usually you should do testing indoor in case the weather is bad or whatever.
Yeah.
And funny enough, of course, when you keep scheduling things outside, eventually the weather is bad.
Hmm.
And so on a day that there was testing scheduled, it rained, and it rained so much that you couldn't bring the equipment out, the electronic equipment, so you couldn't do the test. And, because these guys had already committed the particular day for all their teams to come out and they didn't want to reschedule, it was going to cost too much, it was going to be too much effort to reschedule. Well, this particular club just decided to make up testing data for an
Wow.
entire OPDR. I'm not talking about one team, I'm talking about a whole club,
Wow.
fake testing data, and they sent it in. And again, I'm not naming any names about anything, but I know one of the people involved in the club. He told me what they did. And I kind of said, "Really? You did that?" And he says, "Yeah." He says, "What? Do you think anybody there is even looking at it?" And then I thought about it and I said, "You know what?" And it's like, I know because I had these conversations with the people at Ontario Soccer for years,
Mhm.
and of course, those conversations never went anywhere. So, and I thought about it. I said, "No, he's right. Nobody is going to look at it." And the truth is, nobody in 10 years that they've had this player development league has ever looked at any of the fitness testing data. So
Mhm.
you can send fake data. It doesn't matter. No one's looking at it anyway. So, I mean,
But isn't it kind of illegal to do that? No, is it not illegal?
illegal according to who? I mean, it's
Yeah.
unethical. If you ever tried to, submit this data for, to be published in a journal or something, yeah, you probably would be punished and whatever. But
Hmm.
the standards and the laws and the rules or whatever are only as good as the people that are enforcing them.
Yeah.
As I said, you have a bunch of incompetent people at the top that are supposed to be in charge of enforcing these standards,
Hmm.
and they don't. So
Yeah.
the clubs can do whatever they want.
Hmm. And would you say for like an aspiring player like me, do you think the ideal route is to stay in Canada, or would I develop more and learn more by going abroad?
Well, I mean, without question, you would develop more and learn more by going abroad. Um, there are good coaches here for sure, and
Hmm.
there are good teams, and very good, some excellent coaches in League One. Some of them are very good friends of mine. Some great coaches in the CPL and even in a lot of the colleges and universities. So even if you stay and you end up playing in one of those environments, it's great. And the truth is, most kids, and maybe this is in your head too, everybody wants to be a professional. I think that's great to
Yeah.
aspire to do that, but you know, most kids can't. It's very hard. You'd have
Hmm.
to be in basically the 99th percentile, to make a living in the game.
Yeah.
So it's not that you won't develop if you stay here, but I'll tell you what won't happen is you won't optimize your development. If you were able to get yourself into an environment, let's just use Europe, and there's lots of other countries, and I can't remember. I feel like maybe your background was French. I don't know if you have
From Congo. Yeah,
from
Congo.
Congo. Okay, so I don't know if you can get at some point get citizenship or something, but in any
Yeah.
case, regardless of that, if you can get yourself into it wouldn't even need to be an academy of a first division or second division club. I mean, in most European countries, France is a good example, but
Yeah.
usually the first three divisions are like full professional. All the
Hmm.
players that are there are full time and they all have academies. But usually there's even, a fourth, fifth, and sometimes even a sixth division. And those are sort of semi-pro or whatever. But if you can get into one of those programs, even if you can get into one of the programs, a lot of the clubs have sort of their academy, and then they have what they call an international academy, which is open to people from all over the world, including from Canada. You may have to pay to be there, but
Yeah.
you got to pay to play here too. So it's not,
Hmm.
you look into it and see if it makes sense for you. But the truth is, if you wanted to optimize your development, I would say that there's no way, no better way to do that than to leave Canada to go to Europe or to South America, where you remember those three things I said, remember?
Yeah.
The academies and the youth teams have incentives to develop, the senior teams have incentives to win, and the coach education is done by experts. So
Hmm.
if you go to a country where those three criteria are met, you'll develop more. That's what I
Hmm.
would say.
Yeah. And lastly, the 2026 World Cup is coming up. Do
Yeah.
you think we are ready for the World Cup, and how will it impact the region?
Do you mean when are you asking about is the team ready or you
Yeah,
mean just
the
the country?
team, Canada, the fans, everything
Okay,
overall,
so
globally.
the team is ready. I mean, our men's team is very strong right now. We'll
Yeah.
see. Like they had an excellent run in the Copa America back in 2024, and in this past year the Gold Cup was a little disappointing, but it's up and down. I mean, they've got some. I mean we have talented players. We have even some players that are playing with top clubs in Europe and a good
Hmm.
group, and you can see even from the friendly matches leading up, like we've been competitive against very good teams,
Yeah.
competitive even against Ecuador, Colombia, look at the game against Romania, even against France, some of the best in the world. we've been competitive enough. Even when we lose, we're competitive. So like we'll see what happens. I think the group is shaping up really interestingly. You never know. You may see Italy and Canada in the same group.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That'd
yeah.
be interesting. We'll see. But you never know. I think it's not a bad draw. And if Canada plays well, they could even get out of the group, and we'll see. So the team I think is going to do well, and I'm looking forward to that. The country, I don't know. I mean, I'm up and down about it. I'm going to give you a recommendation for a good book that you should
Mhm.
read. You can see
Yeah,
why I feel the way I feel about it. The book is called Soccernomics. Okay, so the suffix nomics, but instead
yeah.
of economics, replace that echo with soccer.
Hmm.
Okay, Soccernomics. And in that book, they talk about all of the challenges that a lot of different countries have faced when they host major tournaments. Okay, FIFA is, the governing body, and, they do a good job with certain things, but they also have very, very strict standards and recommendations that they place on the countries and the host cities. They have to have a certain number of stadiums and
Yeah.
training fields and all of that. And, that's not always easy for these countries and these cities to do because, the truth is like, where are they going to find the money to make all these
Hmm.
renovations and build new things? And well, often the money comes from taxpayers, and
Yeah.
sometimes people get a little resentful of that. We may end up with some nice facilities after that, can more people can train on and all that. So that would be great. But there is a like an economic impact that not everybody's happy with. You should, in that book specifically, they talk a lot about Brazil and what
Yeah.
happened in Brazil after hosting the World Cup. So you should look into that. The second thing, which is, and again, I'm not an economist, so I'm going out of my wheelhouse a bit, but
Yeah.
it's not just the building of the facilities and stadiums and all of that. It's the temporary, and we're talking about 1 month or whatever it is that all these fans are coming from all over the world. The
Hmm.
temporary stress that puts on all of the hotels, the restaurants, anyone, the service industry, all these, these companies, which I'm sure they appreciate the business, but all of a sudden now they have to hire like 30 new employees for 1 month.
Yeah.
Then what? I mean, and what about the people who are working there? They're going to get this part-time job for 1 month or
Hmm.
6 weeks or whatever. And, so there's a lot of like economic impact and economic fallout that can happen if you read the book. Because in fact, I remember when I read it, I first read the first edition of the book. I read it over 10 years ago. And I remember being really surprised to see that in fact, a lot of countries around the world don't want to host the World Cup.
Yeah.
And a lot of them also don't want to host the Olympics, like the two major sporting events in the world.
Hmm.
Even though from the outside, if you're a fan or like I was a coach and I was really into it, I was like, wow, like why would in this book they talked about Brazil, they talked about how many countries maybe could have been hosts, but like withdrew their bids and didn't want to go through with it. And
Hmm.
so are we ready? I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be so much excitement and just so much of a positive vibe that probably during the tournament everything's going to feel amazing. You know,
Hmm.
Afterward, are those some
Yeah.
of those things going to happen? Maybe. I hope not. I don't want any any negative
Yeah.
consequences to come out of it. And I'm in the game. Obviously, I'm a coach. I'm in the business, and I don't want to. I
Hmm.
want the game to grow. I want the game to develop. I want more people to play it and coach and all of it. And I want everyone to benefit from it. But I'm not so sure that it will. So
Yeah,
we'll see.
what you're describing there is kind of like Qatar, the last World Cup host. They hosted, and afterwards, they haven't really seen like a significant impact. Their stadiums now, some of them have been destroyed, replaced,
Right.
and now like the World Cup, basically, they had their 5 minutes of fame, but afterwards, no lasting impact.
Yeah, yeah, and again, it's I can't give you all the data.
Yeah.
I'm not speaking about something that I have really honestly enough expertise in, but I've seen that. I've seen what's happened in other countries, and so I think that's why a lot of times maybe these countries don't want to host, but there is a lot of excitement and a lot of positive that comes out of it too. So
Yeah.
I think you like anything else, you'll have ups and
Yeah.
downs, and
Yeah.
we'll see.
Now, usually when I conclude my podcast, we have a tradition where the previous guest leaves a question for the next guest. So
Oh,
the
wow.
question that's actually been left for you is, what is the toughest moment you faced with an athlete or a team, and how did you turn it around?
Wow. Okay. That's a big question. Okay. I'm going through a couple of them in my head right now. Yeah. There was a player, I'm not naming any names,
Yeah, yeah,
but
of course. Of
back when
course.
I worked with the women's under 17 national team, there was a player who, I knew this player because she had even trained in my facility before, and as a kid, and so it's not just that I knew her from her time in the national team, but I knew her even before. I knew her family, and a great kid, and a very talented player.
Yeah.
And because of some of the challenges with, I've told you already about some of the challenges with
Yeah,
player
yeah.
identification and all of
Yeah.
that. And, she didn't get into like, she didn't get any invite to any national team camp
Hmm.
until the very last camp, right before the national team leaving to compete in the World Cup. So she wasn't even part of the World Cup qualifying.
Wow.
So it's sort of, I mean, it happens sometimes, but
Yeah.
it's a little more rare. Usually by the time you qualify, you kind of have your
Yeah.
squad in place and all that. But in any case, I guess the reason this player comes to mind is that I remember speaking to her, and to her family, when she wasn't taken to World Cup qualification.
Hmm.
And I mean, we're talking about these players like, she was like 15 years old. They're kids, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And she was devastated and not just like upset about it, but actually that she wanted to quit.
Yeah.
Like literally wanted to quit soccer. Okay, and as I said, she was good. She was easily one of the most talented players in Ontario. Clearly was, good enough, right? We didn't know how good
Yeah.
she would be, but she was good enough and very fit. And I always like to work with the fit players because
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
they earn my respect.
Yeah.
But anyway, and I remember, speaking with her and her family, and she was crying, and in any case, it's like I'm a fitness coach. I have no control over player selection, like literally nothing,
Mhm.
but I'm there with them, and I talk to them, and whatever. And so I remember just saying to her, even though partly even in the back of my mind, I believed it, but I didn't believe it 100% because I'm kind of, and I said, look, like, just because you didn't get taken to this, it doesn't mean that that this thing is over for you. It doesn't mean that you're not going to get another chance. And literally, I'm actually saying this, and in my heart, I'm half believing it. I didn't
Mhm. Yeah, yeah,
believe
yeah.
it completely, but I said it anyway, because I said that, well, there's got to be a chance. I said, you never know that, who knows, someone could get hurt. You could have an issue with a player not being able to make it, or
Mhm.
school commitments or family issues, or you never know. So just keep training hard because in Ontario we had this at the time NDC National Development
Yeah,
Center,
yeah.
and so they were still training together, the players, in the provincial group, and she was one of them. And I said, the truth is, if you keep working hard, at some point I think somebody's going to notice you, even though they didn't notice you now. And I said that to her, and for what it's worth, I'm probably not the only one that said that, but I said it anyway. And and she did. She really, really just trained like an animal, the whole summer. And sure enough, some of the coaches that were there, they did notice. And they invited her to this last camp, which was actually done in Toronto. Like, it was just a domestic camp. And so the players from Montreal and BC, and they all flew in for it. And in any case, I just remember the very clearly the meetings, which all of us coaches had a meeting together with each player one at a time.
Mhm.
And these meetings were, some of the players, they were already in the team. Everyone knew they were going to go there. The players weren't like, some of them were not. It's not like they were coming to these meetings thinking they're going to get told they're being cut or whatever. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
some of them, they knew that they're going to the World Cup, all of it. And then there's five or six of them which could go either way.
Yeah.
They didn't know. And of course, this was one of them. She didn't know at the end of this training camp if we as a team were going to select her and take her or if not. And I remember being with the coaches and we all kind of talked about it together to try to decide, do we want to give the bad news or the good news, right? Do we want to
Hmm.
give that news first and then explain the rationale? Or do we want to give the rationale first and then give the news at the end?
Yeah.
And in any case, in this particular case, we decided that the players who were going to make it and go to the World Cup, we tell them first that they're going, and then,
Hmm. Yeah.
get the weight off their shoulders and whatever. Whereas the players that were getting bad news, and there were, okay, there were three, that got the bad news, right? We would give them rationale first and then tell them they're not going. Okay.
Hmm.
Now, in any case, this particular player, right? She was one that she got good news.
Wow.
And yeah, it's like a memory that sticks in my head
Hmm. Yeah.
that I remember that the head coach just looked her in the eyes and said, "You're going to the World Cup."
Yeah.
And she started crying, and
Yeah.
truth, man, I started crying. It was like everyone, like imagine
Yeah.
like it's three of us grown men and another female coach. All of us are bawling our eyes out, and
Hmm.
he's crying and all that. And anyway, so that was sort of it had a nice ending for her. And she ended up playing. She played in the very first game of the World Cup,
Yeah.
came off the bench, and in a game where there were about 36,000 people in the stadium
Hmm.
in Azerbaijan, and I warmed her up before that game. I warmed up all the substitutes, obviously, and before she was going in, and I kind of reminded her of that as we were doing the warm up, and I said, "You see,
Yeah.
if you just stick with it, if you just stick with it, you never
Hmm.
know what can happen." So that's it's kind of a happy memory for me. But anyway,
No, it's an inspirational story. It really is. It
yeah,
shows like you should just never give up, always persevere.
yeah, it does. Yeah, yeah.
But in the end, just thank you, coach, for coming on. Very insightful podcast. Thank you so much.
You got it. You're very welcome.
Thank you.
All right.